Hi guys, welcome to Pixel Affair. It's Kobe here, and in today's video we are going to do this. So before I actually go ahead and start to show how we will do something like this, let me actually first of all say thank you to each and every one of you who have subscribed to the channel and everyone who has watched my video, liked, comment and everything. I really appreciate it, and I want to say thank you for the subscribers. Now I'm at 5,000 or 5k subscribers, and I'll love you to continue giving me the support so that we can continue to do a lot more interesting stuff, right, and learn more. That will give me the boost to continue to do more tutorials on stuff and experiment more. So thank you very much for each and every one of you who have subscribed and anyone who has watched my video. I really appreciate it. So now let's actually go back into the video. So this idea uses similar technique like the one I did with the Entagma logo, right? The logo dissolve. But among the comment section, someone asked how you get the whole polygons or the whole thing to disappear, and that actually got my attention. So I decided to use similar technique as well, but then at the end of the day, get it to dissolve or disappear. So let's see how we will do this in Cinema 4D. So before I go into Cinema 4D, I'm in Photoshop, and this is the logo that we are going to use. So ideally, if you have a logo like this, you should use like something like the pen tool to redraw your logo, or maybe take it into Illustrator to redraw it and later export it into Cinema 4D. But in this case, I'm actually going to use the black and white image as it is in Cinema 4D. So let's get into Cinema 4D and see how we will do that. So I'm in Cinema 4D, and this is Cinema 4D R26. But I think everything I'm doing here you should be able to do it in previous versions of Cinema 4D as well. So the first thing to actually bring in a black and white image in Cinema 4D to convert it into spline is this tool in Cinema 4D called the Vectorizer. So if I come into my objects, you can see we have the Vectorizer here when I choose it. And now if I click on this folder icon, it will send me into my Explorer. I'll choose the folder which I have my icon in, then I'll choose the logo, say open, I'll choose no, and you can see it's brought the white part of my image and trying to convert it into spline, but it's very, very crooked, right? So what you can do is that in here, the tolerance, I can reduce it to like 0, and you can see it gets a bit straight. But if you actually zoom close to it, right, you see it's very, very jagged, especially this side, right? So I'm going to use a different tool, which is actually a plugin. But if you don't have, you can simply redraw it in Photoshop or Illustrator and just export it. So the tool I'm going to use, I'll come into my plugins and I'll choose Vectorizer, Tools 4D Vectorizer, and it works similarly as the Cinema 4D default Vectorizer. So I'll click on the folder icon here, it will do the same thing, and I'll come and choose my logo. I'll say open and I'll choose no, and you can see this one gives us a bit cleaner spline. All right, so that's all we want to use it for. If maybe your logo is not like the size is not working well, you can use the aspect ratio to actually squash or stretch it how you want it, right? But this is perfect. So I'll just press C to make it editable. Then I'll go ahead and create an extrude object. So I'll create extrude. I'll make the spline a child of the extrude to extrude our text as logo, and you can see it's too thick. So let's reduce the offsets to something like 50. All right, and then the next thing we have to do, maybe I'll add a bit of subdivision to like 3. Then we come into the caps, and in the caps, in Cinema 4D latest versions, you see the caps. In here you have load preset. So if I click on load preset, it brings in all these presets which has already been made, right? And you are going to use the quarter circle preset, right? So if I click on the quarter circle preset, double click on it, you can see it gives us this bevel, right? And I think it's fine. So what I'll do, I'll come into the attributes, the settings, and I'll check extend shape. You can see it does something different. So I'll choose extend shape, and I'll make the size something like 3, and also I'll adjust the curve a little bit, right? So all this, everything is fine. So we come down to the caps type so that you get a little bit of segment, because if I change the display to garage shading with lines, you can see the caps doesn't have enough segment in there. So I'll actually choose something like regular grid, and now but for now we don't want a lot of segments right? These two experiments, so maybe I'll actually even increase the size to maybe 12. You don't want a lot of segments in there. And the bevel, you can see there's so much segment in the bevel too, so that one I'll reduce it to something like maybe 10 for now, so that it will be quite fast when we start using the connect and the forces, so that it wouldn't slow our scene so much. So right now that we've actually done all of this, right, let's apply a material for us to see. So I'll go back to the garage shading, right? So let's create our materials. So I already have these two materials in here, and this material, let me actually apply the first one, the gold looking one. You can see it gives us this gold sort of feel, and I have tutorial on here on Cinema 4D that talks about how to create a gold material without using real reflection and everything, for especially for a quick render and stuff. You know, there's a whole tutorial that explains how to do something like this. So if I hit render, you can see we have the gold feel, but there's no reflection and everything. So I'll apply the gold to it. And so if you want to understand like how to create this simple material, you can actually check the tutorial out later. So I'll apply the gold, and I'll apply this material, the second one, to it. It also has similar technique to it, but I've just added like bump with a bit of texture in it, but it uses the similar technique, right? So I'll apply the second one, and in the second one, select the object tab, come to the attributes, and the selection we will type in C1, which is for the front cap. So now the front cap is the only part which is being affected by the blue material, right? So now we have our material created. The next thing is that let's go ahead and create our Voronoi fracture. So I'll come into my Mograph. You can go in here, Mograph menu here, or you can come down here, choose our Voronoi fracture, right? And we make our extrude a child of the Voronoi fracture, right? You can see now it started breaking it down, right? So we'll go into the Voronoi fracture, and I'll select the source. So this is the point that's causing our extrude to be broken into pieces. So let's increase the point to like something like 200, right? And you can see, first of all, let's hide the points. So if you click on this three dots here, you hide the points in here, right? And again, I don't like the work plane that's in that scene, so I can come into our filter, and I'll click on work plane, and that one to disappear, so that you have a clean scene. Don't distract us. Now the distribution is set to uniform, so you can see the fracture are all uniform and everything, but I want it to be centered in the middle. So I'll change the distribution type to normal, and you can see now in the middle part is there's more fragments or fractures than the outside part. So yeah, I'll reduce it a bit, maybe 0.8 is even fine, 0.08 is fine. And then the next is we are going to add our our random effector, right? So the first thing I'll select, with the Voronoi fracture selected, you can simply come into our effectors, and you can add a random effector, which is, now you can see everything is moving about, right? So I'll select the random effector, come to its parameters. We don't want it to move on the X and the Y, so I'll set all of them to 0, and then we want it to move just on the Z, something like maybe 100 centimeters for now, right? And now we want it to animate in, so it starts, you can see it's randomized. Now we want it to animate it, so like it smoothly comes back to form the logo, right? But we are not going to use keyframe to key it. We will use another fill to do that. So in the random fill tab, we can come in here. You can see we have this special layers here, and in there we have time. So if I choose time, you can see everything has gone back to the initial state. If I hit play, you can see now it's within 30 frames, it's animating our random effector, but we want it the other way around. So I'll come into the remapping tab here, I'll come down, and I'll choose invert. So you see at 0, everything exploded, and at frame 30, everything is formed. So let's go back into the layer tab, and we want it to end at frame maybe 120. So now if you go back and hit play, and see it's forming at 120. Let's increase our number of frames to like 300 for now. And now if you hit play, you can see it's smoothly forming our logo. That's what you are going to use. We are good. And now let's actually start adding a camera and everything. So I'll go ahead and add camera to it. Even with the time, so what I can do is the time, everything moves smoothly. So maybe I can add, let's say, a random fill to it, right? Let's see, and probably change it to overlay, so that it gives it a little bit of variation, but it's not that significant. But I mean, everything is fine because we are going to use camera and it wouldn't be that obvious. So let's go ahead and create our camera. So I'll create my camera, click on this icon so that we'll be looking through the camera, and I'll make sure in the parameters, the coordinates, everything is set to 0, right, except the Z position. All right, so at frame 0, let's actually zoom in very close, and we want it to be a bit dramatic, right? So what we are going to do is I'll actually, in the camera focal length, I'll set it to like say 10, so that it'll be very wide, you know, and it'll be a bit dramatic when it's zooming through, right? Yeah, so I'll set it close to maybe 130, right? And I'll set a keyframe here at 130, and I'll do the same thing for the focal length because you don't want it to be that dramatic all the time. So I'll set a keyframe as well at frame 0, and at frame maybe 180, I'll bring the focal length back to maybe Y25, and I'll bring the camera, let's go back to the camera coordinates, and I'll bring that one to maybe 600, maybe minus 600 to, yeah, I think 600 will be fine. 603, it doesn't matter. So now let's hit play and see what we have. Right, maybe at frame 90, you want it to be a bit closer a bit, so let's zoom in a bit here. Want it to be still closer at this point, yeah. Right, so now let's hit play, and now we have our camera animation and our logo forming through the Voronoi fracture, right? So I'll select the Voronoi fracture, come to the object. I don't want to see the colored fragment as well, so I'll click on color fragment so that we see our textures. And now let's hit play once more, and now you can see our logo is forming. So now we've done the first part. Now the next part is how to disintegrate this into nothing, right? Let's first go ahead and create our material, the third material, the bent material, which comes after everything has revealed, right? So you can see after we have this final logo, then it starts turning black, right, subtly. So let's go ahead and create the third material. So I'll come into my material manager, and I'll actually create a new, you know what, I'll come into my asset browser, and I'll search in here. I'll search for burn. You can see we have this burning material in here in this portfolio already, so I'll drag and drop it into my objects, right? If I double click on the burning material, you can see we have all of this. So this is going to be our third material we apply. So let's go ahead and apply it to our Voronoi fracture, right? In fact, let's apply it to our object itself, and you can see it has its, let me, if I hit render, you know, it's applied to it like the way we want it, but I don't want the burnness, like the brightness in it. So what I can do is in the go into the, I think the color, or not the color, like in the luminance rather, and I'll clear everything, right? But we don't want the luminance, so we are good. I just want this, just the black part, right? But right from start, if we hit play, you can see, no, it's already there, but we don't want it to show. We want our original image to show, then later this smoothly comes in. So we are going to use a gradient to transition it in, right? So in the luminance, right, I'll check the luminance, I'll bring it back, and I'll come in the textures, I'll click on this, and I'll choose a gradient, right? So we are going to use gradient to sweep it, right? So I'll get the gradient something like this. I think something like this is fine. right? So where it's white, the black will show, and where it's black, it will not show. But then we change the gradient type from 2DU to 3D linear, and now we'll first of all set our start space to minus like 2000. We want it to be very wide, right? So because in the start space, this is actually X, and this is Y, and this is Z, right? And the same thing is X, Y, Z. So we want it to be wide. That's why we made this one minus 2000. So that will be like a wide texture, right? And now we can use the N to animate it in and out. You see how it is. So we can use the X, the NX, this one, to animate it in and out, right? So let's actually do that. But you can see what's happening is that it sees every individual Voronoi fracture as a separate element, right? So what we can do is now let's go ahead and create our connect object. So I'll first of all close this. I'll come into my object and I'll create our connect object. I'll make the Voronoi fracture a child of the connect, right? I'll drag it down and I'll select all of this rather, and I'll make them, place them on the connect object rather. So you can see now it's with the connect object, it ceases at one object, right? Now let's select the connect object, and in the attributes, let's first of all check weld so that it doesn't weld our points together, right? So we will use the connect object to control all of this. All right, so now let's first off, so when everything is formed from frame 0 up to frame 120, that's when the whole logo forms, right? So maybe at from 130 coming, that's when we want our white, or we want to start animating our material, right? So I'll double click on it, material again. In the luminance, I'll go into the gradient and I'll start animating the gradient here, the N. So I'll start animating it. But before I do that, let me add a little bit of turbulence in there. So I'll increase the turbulence like 100, and I'll reduce the scale of the turbulence to like maybe 6, right? And everything is fine. But unfortunately, you can't see the turbulence in here. But if I hit render, you can see it gives it a little bit of noise. Maybe you can even make this one a bit closer so that it gives it a little bit of noise in there. One thing that is important is that you should make sure your object space, the space is set to object, right? It's very important. So now we can actually, I shouldn't have closed it. So you can go in and now maybe from frame 130 start animating this particular perimeter, right? So at frame 130 you want it to be black, and let's render to see we don't have any white peeping through, right? So I'll set a keyframe at frame 130, and at frame maybe 240, like we want it to be quite long. So we start animating it coming in, right? We can always go ahead and animate, like change our keyframes if you want. So I can simply take and drag it. Can even make it even longer from 130 to 270. All right. So we are done with the animation, but you can see it's just showing just the white. It's not revealing our logo. All right. So all we have to do is that we will select our texture. You can, the luminance, right click on texture, copy, and click on alpha. If I first of all open the animation in here, you can see we have the gradient there. But if you come into the alpha, right click and paste it, you can see it's added another gradient down here, right? And this is important because later I'll show you something how we are going to use this first one, which is for the luminance, and this one is for the alpha. So first of all, I'll click, check, make sure alpha is checked, and I'll come into the luminance. I'll set everything to 0, right? And this one is set to multiply. In the luminance is set to multiply, so it's not really affecting our color and everything here, which is the blackness and everything, right? So if we hit play, you can see it's smoothly transforming from the original color we have into this black one, right? So we are good. So if I hit play, you can see because of the connect object now our scene is quite slow, right? But we will actually do something to fix that. So it's coming in smoothly, and now you can see our texture smoothly runs, but it's still too fast, right? So we can actually, no, first of all, let's hold on for that. We'll do that later. So everything is fine. Now let's go ahead and create our so you see, let me first explain. So because of the connect, you can see the whole thing is very slow, right? And the connect, we don't necessarily need it right from frame 0. So because this animation, everything is fine from frame 0 to 120. That's where everything, the logo forms, right? So we want the connect to come on from frame 121, right? And we want the Voronoi fracture also to go off at frame 121. So at frame 120, I'll set a keyframe, select the Voronoi fracture in the basic, and I'll enable, you see we have enable, right? I'll set a keyframe at frame 121. I want it to be on, and that I'll come to the connect at frame 120. I'll uncheck it, disable it, and I'll set a keyframe. And immediately at frame 121, I'll now enable the connect. I'll set a keyframe, and I'll come to the Voronoi fracture. I'll disable it, and I'll set a keyframe. So what's doing that is just switching, right? What we can actually use an espresso to actually control that when I turn off one, it should switch that, but that one will make it a bit complicated. Maybe in other tutorial I'll show you how to do something like that. When you turn off this one should be turned on. You can use simple range mapper or simple espresso to turn those into two different things, right? So now here you can see, so let's go back. If we hit play, you can see now it's very smooth, everything comes fast, and then quickly it converts, and now the connect is on, this one is off, right? That's exactly what we want. Now let's bring in the elements that we will use to disintegrate this. So I'll come in, then I'll create my first I'll create a jiggle deformer, right? I'll drag it down, and I'll create a poly effects as well. So I'll come into my Mograph menu, and I'll choose poly effects. I'll make the poly effects and the jiggle deformer all a child of the connect object, right? But first of all, let me select the jiggle deformer, come into its attributes, object, and the stiffness, I'll set it to 0. This tutorial, like this video, is from here going is exactly the same process I used in the Entagma logo dissolve, right? So I'll drag these two in here. So the poly effects and the jiggle deformer is in there, and I'll do the same thing for them. So at frame 120, we don't want them on. So at frame 120, we don't want them on. So I'll select the two, come to the enable, I'll uncheck it, and I'll set a keyframe. And at frame 121, I'll enable it, right? And I'll set a keyframe. So we don't want them on from frame 0. Then it comes on at frame, right? So everything is fine. And now let's go into the poly effects, the transform, right? We will increase it rather. So we'll increase it like 1.02, 1.02 for all of them, right? And now if we now select our jiggle deform, in fact it's not even necessary, we can come into our forces, simulate forces, and we will choose turbulence, like one of these. I'll choose turbulence, I'll drag it down, and I'll actually increase the strength to maybe 70. I'll reduce the frequency a little way down to probably 10, and I'll also increase the scale to probably 36 will be fine, right? And I'll select the jiggle deformer. In the forces, I'll drag and drop in the turbulence as well. And now if I hit play, let's see what we have. Comes in smoothly, and it will start beginning to slow down. You can see now it's disintegrating our logo into nothing, right? But it's not, it's just disintegrating everything. So that's where we want to use the how do you call it, the gradient animation that we did to control our turbulence, right? So simple. I'll select the turbulence, come to fields, and I'll come into the fields down here. I'll choose shader field, right? And in the shader field, we will tell it to look at the luminance of this texture tag. So I'll choose luminance, and I'll set this. I'll use this color picker to choose this particular texture. I can simply drag and drop it in here, and now it's looking at the luminance of this material, right? So if I come in there, you can see there's the luminance. What's in the luminance? Remember, this is what we animated, right? So where it's white means it should take action, something should happen, and where it's black means nothing should happen. So it's going to actually use that to affect our poly. So if I hit play and go ahead, you can see now. Let's see what happens. It starts taking over, so you can see the gradient start taking over, and it's that simple, right? But what happens is that it's happening the same time as when the bend or the like texture is happening, so you don't actually see the whole thing turn a little black before the disintegration, right? So that's when we come into our dope sheet or timeline, right? And now you can see this is the one for the alpha, and this is the one for the luminance, right? So we select this. I'll make it smaller in here, and now offset it a bit, right? In fact, I'll make this one quite longer. Let's increase our time to even like 450. Let's add a lot more time to it, and I'll make it smaller. You can control everything here with these icons or the same default controls that you have in C4D. So the hand is for moving it, and this one is for scaling and everything. So I'll actually set this one a bit, and I'll make it even longer, like 420. That's fine. And now let's hit play again. Let's see what we have. So from here going, you just have to play around with it to get the timing of your stuff right. If not, so you can see our texture is coming in. Then after that, the gradients should take over, but I think it takes too long to come in. So let's actually first of all go in again. So from here going, we keep adjusting our timeline. So we will select the gradient, this one as well, and make it even longer. So right, maybe make this one also a little bit longer. So let's go ahead and hit play again to see how it looks. So from here going, we play around with it to eventually we feel like we get something that looks cool or makes sense. All right. So now you can see our texture starts coming in, and now you can see our turbulence is also polygons have started also disintegrating, right? So if we hit render to see what we have, you can see everything is fine, right? I think I should make this one a bit closer. So we adjust it to eventually get something that you are cool with. So that's basically the idea to do this, right? So from here going, you are literally done. The next is I'll probably add a little bit of gravity, like some other forces. So I'll come into my forces, simulate, and I'll choose gravity, right? And if I hit play, you can see our gravity force. The gravity, you can see this blue line pointing downwards. If I hide this, you can see this is the gravity force. You can see it's pointing downwards, right? But we want it to be the gravity to move it upwards. So we can either use a minus gravity, or we can simply take these two and rotate it to where we want the gravity to go. So I'll rotate it up something like this, right? And now in the gravity, we have to apply it to the jiggle deformer. So in the forces, I'll drag in the gravity, right? And we don't want it to affect it straight away. So we will use the same shader, this particular shader, a field in the gravity as well. So I'll select the gravity in the field, then we drag in the shader field, right? And now let's go ahead and play again to see what we have. but it's all moving upwards at the same time. So we can also, again, in the gravity, add extra like randomness to it so that it doesn't sort of, all of them doesn't move at the same pace. So I'll come into the gradient, I'll add random field to it. It's set to add a max, but we add it, send it to like subtract, and maybe increase the scale to maybe 200. All right, and I think this one should work. So from here going, you are literally done. The next is how to actually after everything is disintegrated, how you can actually scale the polygons off or make it disappear from the scene, right? So that's, we are going to use another poly effects, but you can see the connect objects is still polygons, right? So we are going to use another poly effects to control it. So all we have to do is to create another null object, make our connect object a child of the null object, right? And you create another poly effects, make it a child of the null object as well. So this poly effects will later, we'll use effector to use it to scale this connect object polygons off. So we are going to use a plane effector. So I'll select my effectors and I'll choose plane effector. You can see it starts affecting them, right? But we don't want that to move it. We check on check position, and we bring back scale. We set it to uniform scale, and we put it to -1, right? But we don't want it to affect it right from start. So we will use fields. So I'll choose, come into my fields, and I'll use a linear field, right? I'll change it to +y. Yeah, so +y. So you scale it from upwards, right? And maybe let me first of all get out of the camera and see polygon, how the whole thing looks like. So because I don't want the linear to be that obvious, I'll make it quite long. I'll make it quite long so that it smoothly scales it without you necessarily noticing that it's some linear thing. So I'll make it quite long like that, right? And now it goes up, and I'll actually probably even rotate it, something like that. So let's hit play. So if I actually go back, I'll hit pause, and now look into the camera, I can see our polygons, everything is disintegrated. So I can start probably animating my linear field here. So I'll set a keyframe in the position, all of it. That's the linear field, right? Select the set a keyframe, and then at frame, maybe at the end of the frame, I'll drag it down completely somewhere here. You can later go in and adjust it as usual, right? So at frame, you can actually even bring it to like frame 300. And now let's look into our camera and hit play to see what we have. If we hit play, everything comes in. And now, so what we can simply do is that after we are done with all of this, we can simply make a preview because the scene is quite slow. So I go ahead and hide all these fields in here. So let's go ahead and make a quick preview. So I'll come into my this particular picture viewer, and that picture viewer, and you see down here you have make preview. So if I click on make preview, it will ask us, do you want to make preview of our render viewport renderer? Choose OK, and the range that we want to make a preview. So I'll leave everything as default, and I'll hit OK, and it will give it a time to make a preview for us so that you see how our scene looks, right? So I'll pause for it to make a preview, then later I'll continue. So our preview is done. So if I hit play, you can see this is what we have. As it comes in smoothly and then begins to transition, and now it disintegrates, right? And as it disintegrates, you can see now the linear field smoothly clears it off. So if you think it clears it off too early, you probably can adjust your keyframes and everything to make it take a little bit of time or if you think it's cool or you want it quicker. So from here going, it's up to your own taste how you adjust it to get what you want. And if you think the polygons are too big for your liking, you can actually go in to your polygons. So I can simply, for instance, come into the extrude, maybe select the text spline, and now I can come into the spline. I'll change it from natural point, right? Because if I change the display to color shading with lines and move out of the camera, you can see, you know, there's not enough segment in here because it's set to natural. But if I increase it, maybe start giving it points, or you can simply set it to like something like a subdivide, and now go ahead and add on your points, right? So you can add your own, go ahead and add extra subdivision and everything to it to get it a bit more detailed, right? And now if I click on my camera, we are smoothly in it. From here going, you are literally done. And because of the textures I used, don't necessarily need, I didn't actually add light. It was just something quick to preview how it will look like, right? So now from here going, you can simply go into your render settings and add your render settings and everything. And if you want, you can start rendering it, or you can use a proper texture like a redshift or anything. You can actually use redshift to actually do everything, the color sweep, everything that I did with the normal material, to do it as well. And if you feel it's necessary and you want to see how, probably I'll use redshift to do similar thing, let me actually know, and I'll do a tutorial on that. I hope this was useful and you learned something from this particular video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.